It's the first time I've ever had. Usually have somebody else read it. It's little. Even if you read it over, it's like, oh my God. That one, I couldn't figure that one out. So anyway, we had our traditionally huge holly jolly Christmas Day and Christmas Eve, where just about all of our family members were present and accounted for on one day or the other. Our son Neil and his wife Teresa threw a great Christmas Eve dinner with ham and kibasi and potatoes, all prepared by his mother-in-law, so I didn't have to do anything. Then we repeated the festivities the next day at our nephew's house in Middletown for another, I think, 30 people. So our Christmas celebrations have always been big because we have all, we meaning the collective we've always tried to follow in the footsteps of Larry's parents, Grace and Nick, who threw this extravagant Christmas Eve dinner with the 7 fishes that at one time included lobster, although I was not around for that one. And most importantly, everyone was always welcome at their table. So my family of origin was different. My mother only had one sister and she didn't get married until she was in her 40s. And although my dad was one of 8, he was sort of at the bottom and everybody had already formed their own little clique. So we never really spent the holidays with his family. But regardless, our merry little Christmas was just as happy, but just smaller and much more sedate with me, my 3 siblings, my mom and dad, my grandparents, and my aunt and uncle. And interestingly, we never went to Christmas Eve Mass because we put up our Christmas tree on Christmas Eve. Plus my mother and father and my aunt and uncle liked to party. So they weren't going to church on Christmas Eve. So when I got a chance to page through Facebook, I could see that those who had posted their own right-sized dinner with their varied menu that reflected their family's tradition. And it was really quite wonderful to see everybody's celebration on such a joyous occasion. It was truly made me happy. So some years ago, I read a newspaper article about the composition of the modern family. And the author discussed nuclear families and blended families and accidental and intentional family relationships as if they were something new and different in the modern world, when such families have more often been the rule rather than the exception. Sadly, so many human beings find themselves in situations where their family of origin dies. Sam and I were just talking about that before Mass began. Or somehow they get lost or problematic due to any number of circumstances over which the family has no control. And the lucky ones, the truly fortunate ones, find other people to take them in. And so I've come to realize that a family is whatever its family thinks it is, and whoever shows up for dinner on the holidays. War, of course, is the greatest destroyer of families. And the ongoing destruction of Gaza has taken over 20,000 lives, a good number of them children. And far too many extended families, just like the ones that gathered around our festive tables, have been killed. And I've reached a point where I can't even read the stories anymore. I just kind of look at the headlines and put the paper aside. I can't watch it on TV because it just breaks my heart. So Gaza and Israel, along with Ukraine, has followed on the heels of civil war in Syria, Yemen, the Congo, and the Sudan, placing peace seemingly beyond our reach. And unfortunately, our human family has never had an easy time living together or tolerating our cultural quirks. And too often, those quirks get magnified into something bigger, more dangerous, and before calmer heads can talk things over, violence breaks out. And how great are the wounds that one human being can inflict upon another. As the book of Ecclesiastes mourns, there is nothing new under the sun. And this is a statement of fact and not acceptance. We can do better because we should know by now that there is only one body that we can wound. And so the time of Jesus and his family was, of course, no different than ours. In their efforts to portray the family of Jesus as the pink of perfection under the pious designation of Holy Family, preachers I've listened to over the course of my life have minimized the trauma that Jesus and his family must have experienced during their lives. Although the Gospels hint of danger and terror lurking all around them, Jesus and Mary too often are portrayed as two best buddies tolerating a doddering Joseph as they happily and busily make their home a centerpiece of domestic tranquility. To be holy, after all, one must be deliriously happy. They cannot be like us, or so the story goes. The truth is probably very different in any variety of ways. Although we really don't know if Jesus and Joseph and Mary were forced to go to Bethlehem because there is no historical record of a Roman census at that time, or if they were forced to flee to Egypt to escape certain death at the hands of Herod, the gospel stories are a key that unlocks the truth. And the truth then, as it is now, is that living under a military occupation by a foreign power is a harrowing experience, and fleeing violence in your native land is a step that you take when all of your other options have run out. And another thing to remember is the family of Jesus that, again, probably lived in mortal fear of the Romans, was not a small family. Jesus, contrary to traditional belief, was not an only child, and there were many hungry mouths to feed. The Gospels say quite clearly that he had at least 4 brothers, James, Joseph, Jude, and Simon. And the Gospels also said that he had sisters, although they are unnamed. So 5 brothers and at least 2 sisters lived together in what was probably a one-room house, a common living arrangement for the poor throughout the millennia. Now, I don't know about you, but I had 1 sister and 2 brothers, and we lived in a fairly small row house, but at least it was bigger than 1 room. And I can remember my parents yelling at least 10 times a day, "Stop bickering." So I can't imagine that the family of Jesus was any different. In addition, food was probably scarce. My father, one of 8, remembered getting 1 slice of meat on his sandwich for lunch during the Depression. Children who do not get enough to eat tend to be much smaller in stature than those who do. They also become intimately acquainted with hunger at a very early age. And this might be one of the reasons why Jesus was always trying to feed people. He knew what it was like to be hungry. And so the family of Jesus was a very human family, in spite of the idyllic myths and legends that have grown up around him and his mother. They were not blessed or holy or unscathed by family altercations and personalities or fear and want. They were part of a messy family, just like all of us. I don't know, maybe your family wasn't messy, mine was. The messiness, but this messiness is important. For where do we learn to live and adapt and relate to others, but in our family of origin? Hopefully we learned at the knees of our parents and from big blowout fights with our siblings, that translates into some sort of learning about how we are to live in the world with others. Perfection cannot provide the milieu for learning. For us to believe that Jesus and his parents were perfect sets the rest of us up for constant failure. And it makes our own mistakes bigger than they need to be, because we obviously cannot be perfect, no matter how hard we try. So within our families that are both dysfunctional and holy, we mature and we grow into the people that we are today. And most of us manage to become mature adults, despite our many family feuds. And it's been this way forever for all families. And so, my friends, tomorrow is New Year's Day, and families of all types will gather again together to celebrate their common history. And as John Lennon said so beautifully, let's hope this year is a good one without any fear, as we pray that wise heads who have hashed out the primal issues in their family as children can sit down at a peace table as mature adults and find a way to stop fighting. And so whether you eat ham or turkey or kibasi tomorrow, whether you watch the Philadelphia Mummers Parade or the Eagles or the Rose Bowl, Happy New Year in whatever family that you choose to meet with.